First of all, welcome to Open Banking Week. Thank you for being here, representing the country that most people think about when they think about open banking. First, the UK, and Brazil with Ingrid. Guys, why don't you start by telling people out there that don't know who you are and what you do, a little bit more about maybe you and your open banking career beginning. Where did it happen and what are you doing with it now? Ingrid, do you want to start?
Yeah, so thank you so much for the invitation. I am Ingrid Barth. I am economist also. And I study at civil engineer, but I never work with a civil engineer. And I used to be in the regular financial market in Brazil. I spent that almost 10 years at JP Morgan and also 4 years at Santander in Brazil. And in 2016, I moved to the fintech space. I started in Neon as the responsible for the SMB strategy for them. And I used to say that I love it. I love it so much, the SMB challenge in Brazil, that in 2018 I started my own business and Linker. Linker is a digital bank for SMB companies in Brazil. And then at the same time, I spent that 2 years as executive director for Brazilian Association of Fintechs. Last year, I received a very special invitation to Felipe Matos to be vice president of the Brazilian Association of Startups, a little bit bigger than only fintech space. And also, I am part of the board of the open banking in Brazil with the central bank, Brazilian Central Bank, representing fintechs, and it's an honor to be part of this construction in Brazil, because I believe we are doing the history here. And then I'm very excited about the opportunity that open banking can give to us to building a best financial market and help our economy to grow and help people to understand more financial and to be part of the financial market. Thank you so much again.
I remember hearing about you when Tail started. When we were looking at taking a photo of the Brazilian open banking scene a few years before open banking was like a big thing, and hearing the story, I think we fell in love with the same idea. Like, how does this just all come together and create like a better human society for us all? Like an SME in Brazil is such a latent, underserved market.
Yeah.
When we go to the UK, is the first thing that most people talk about when they talk about open banking. It has evolved so much from PSD2 to the state we're in right now, to cool initiatives around open data. Tell for people out there a little bit about you and a little bit about what has been the trajectory and what you guys doing right now that everybody in the world should know.
Sure. Well, can I just start by saying it's absolutely great to be here. So excited.
Yes, of course you can. Great. It will be in person one day. I like that. That sounds creepy, but like I'm done with the screen. So
little creepy. No, I just, when I look around the world and I see the open banking is a phenomena, and it's a global phenomena, and it is going country by country by country. And, it's super exciting, I think, to see, where Brazil is. I think it's super exciting to see where Australia is. I think it's super exciting to see where the UK is, and, it's leading the rest of Europe, which is fun, makes us happy. Who am I? My name is Imran, and I am the trustee of open banking in the UK. And it's a kind of a weird title, but basically what it means is that I've been appointed by the government to lead an organization that creates the standards for open banking And then I have the powers to require the 9 largest banks to implement those standards. And really what it does is it builds off PSD2, which I know you guys are all super familiar with, and it builds off access to accounts for data and also for payments. We've been doing it now for about 4 years, and we're getting to the end of the implementation. Now, I've no doubt that you guys in Brazil will do it quicker and better than we've done. But you know, when you go first, these things are hard. And I think we've learned a ton of stuff on the way. And I just really hope that you guys can learn and benefit from our experiences. So I'm here to share all that with you. I can say a little bit more about who I am and how I kind of turned up in this role.
Yeah, that would be great, because the trustee job sounds like a really big job, and we'll get to like, how do you actually get to implementation? Because I want to dig into that since I'm now here, part of this conversation. I want to learn.
And you know, for the nerds out there, actually, my official title is implementation trustee. So I've got implementation all through, because the skill in this stuff is actually getting it built. You know, it's kind of amazing that this is even a big thing, because we're just talking about APIs. APIs are pretty straightforward. They've been in existence for several decades.
Exactly.
But in financial services suddenly seems really hard. Well, it's hard because of the implementation. But just a few words on who I am and how I kind of ended up in this situation. I like Ingrid, I'm an engineer by training, but like Ingrid as well, I didn't actually do engineering in an engineering firm. I got into financial services. I was doing consulting. I was an investor in financial services. And then actually I ended up leading the fintech practice at Ernst & Young globally, which is a really interesting job. And when I was doing that, you know, there's so much innovation in financial services, whether it's kind of AI or blockchain or crypto or crowd or peer-to-peer, so much going on. But it always came back to the data. None of these things worked, or you know, you couldn't do anything with it unless you had the data. And everyone's getting very excited about the other bits. And I was thinking, well, where's the data going to come from? The banks have it, but they don't use it. And the customers should have it and take control of it. And that's the kind of the principle of open banking. So I advise the government on open banking. And, you know, you got to be careful when you advise governments. At some point they say, well, you know, stop advising and start doing. And so 4 years ago, they appointed me to this role of trustee for open banking. So now I run an organization called the Open Banking Implementation Entity. It's got about 100 people working for it at the moment. It's funded by the banks, and it builds the infrastructure, it sets the standards, and we've got some regulatory powers which mean that we can make the big banks implement these things. But we're really happy at the moment, because even though we are mandating a small number of the big banks to do this, I'm really pleased to say now that we've got over 100 banks here in the UK and around the UK all implementing the standards, and they're doing so voluntarily. We've got...
Hallelujah. They understood, they saw the light.
Well, it's kind of interesting because, you know, this started off as a competition remedy.
Yeah.
And the idea that you'd get smaller players who would voluntarily take the same medicine that you're giving to the large players shows that we're doing something really quite special here. Mm-hmm. And that's one side of the equation. Of course, you know, open banking is a bit like a seesaw. You've got to have kind of fintechs, third parties on the other side building propositions. I'm very pleased to say that we've got over 300 authorized entities in the open banking ecosystem, with another 450 in the pipeline. So we've got more than all of Europe combined, which is great. We've got a really vibrant...
It'd be really, really great if all of Europe combined was even bigger. And like this whole, like everybody saw the light. That would be really great.
Yeah, you know, it's coming, right? It's coming. These things do take time. It takes time for... You got to build the standards and the infrastructure, then the banks have got to implement it, then the third parties have got to play with it. And then once that, well, they got to get authorized, obviously, then they got to play with it. Once they play with it, then they got to build and take it to market. So it's a long process. But, you know, I'm very pleased to say that headline numbers is that here in the UK, we've got real people using it, even though we're not finished with implementation. And we announced a little while back that we hit 3 million users, and the growth rate is super exciting. You know, we've got every ambition that there are going to be tens of millions of people benefiting from open banking in the course of the next few years. And, you know, I'm sure we'll spend time talking about where this goes in the future, but there are bigger visions that open banking sits in as well.
I'm looking forward to digging into some of these. Why don't we start, like, Ingrid, I want to tell, like, now Imran had an opportunity to share a little bit more about how it's evolved over the 4 years by telling his story, which is just crazy. Like, congratulations on an incredible career, probably super interesting. I can't imagine what it would be like to be the trustee. It kind of reminds me back of like very fancy sounding days. But I think it should be fancy because we're talking about building the fabric of a different economy, an economy that is digital, an economy that in Brazil, I know why I'm passionate about it, has an opportunity to include people that just weren't there. You're working, Ingrid, personally on a side around an underserved market that leads to a Black economy, not very fair rates, lots of different aspects of traceability when you bring technology to the place. You bring transparency, you change the marketplace, and you've been leading this, if people got it right, through the work you've been doing around the central bank, bringing this conversation together. How has it been? Imran talking about people complying and even signing up for saying, yes, please, can I have that? Can I be part of this standard? How is it in Brazil for people other than me out there that don't know or want to hear from you?
Okay, so it's very nice to hear about hear about the UK implementation and open banking, because I can see a lot of similarity. For example, for banks, especially for banks, we have 5 banks in Brazil, big banks in Brazil, that is leading the market, the financial market. And then now in the implementation phases, we have more 200, 300 other entities that wanted to be part of this implementation at the beginning of the open banking. So they are seeing the light for sure, but I believe that it's about competition for sure, but I believe also that it's about time to be on top of this innovation in the first beginning. So they are seeing that it's a very good opportunity to understand open banking in the beginning of this transformation. So it's very similar that we are happening in Brazil. So about my career, is so strange to talk about that, because it's not linear. For sure, when we have a storytelling, it's easy to say, oh, I started here and and after that I moved it to here. But when you are living, it's totally different. So I really love to take opportunities. So if it's what someone showed to me, oh, we have this opportunity to represent this, that, oh, okay, I like it. So for example, 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to represent Brazil and the United Nations special group to understand more blockchain for financial services. So I was the Brazilian delegate for blockchain, representing Brazil in Russia and Spain, in UK and Rio also. So I like it. I like this type of innovation situation, challenge to understand better. And also, I'm a little bit nerd. In Brazil, we normally say that people that like to understand, to study, it's like a nerd. I am like that, and I like this type of challenge. So it's not linear, and then the opportunity is coming, I just take the opportunity and try to do the best job. And then for open banking, especially for open banking, is not so, oh, appear, and I will take this opportunity. I started to work with open banking in 2019, I believe in the beginning of 2019, and with the AB Fintech, Brazilian Association of Fintech, when needed at the time a person who talk with the central bank about that, representing fintechs, and then I had the opportunity to be with the president of Brazilian Central Banking in the first workshop for open banking in Brasilia. Brasilia is the place that is the central bank is located. And then for an economist to be in the central bank with the president of the central bank, it's like it's a dream that that is happened. So I started to think about open banking, to work with open banking in this workshop, and after that, the central bank normally included me in the communications, emails, and requested some specific points related to the fintech space. And after that, we had the Grupo de Trabalho working group for the governance. So we started to think about the governance that will be part of the board. And then after that, the central bank said to me and Thiago that we had a special share for fintechs, and we will be part of this special share with the same level of vote that, for example, Febraban. Febraban is the association for the big banks, and then it showed it to us that the importance of the fintechs in this construction, because we have the same power of vote that the big banks in Brazil, because they have almost 90% of the financial market. But we have the technology piece in our DNA, the fintechs. So it's very important to bring this expertise to this board, and then central bank show it to us that they are looking for it, and we are important in this process. And this is the story. And we are here now doing everything that we needed to do, showing what we needed to show, and including the requests for the market, the fintechs market, to help to bring the best open banking that we can do. And learning a lot.
I think we all are. I certainly am through the stories, and I can feel the pressure and change and David and Goliath in some aspects in a lot of the markets. I think that's a similarity we've seen certainly with open banking in the Middle East and some of the other countries that I've been spending some time in. I've been also seeing that size change, and it's interesting to see the Brazilian Central Bank making the decision of the voting weight representing at least the weight of a voice in a room, in order to bring some evidence, which I think is my favorite part of at least our central bank in the process. Imran, you talked about the banks complying, and now the change to some of the banks signing up and understanding the purpose of all of this, or at least seeing a little bit of the light, or getting ahead. How has it been on that competition, cooperation, openness, as this legislation and initiative and all the sort of adjacent legislation and regulation around privacy and GDPR that are so needed, because you're totally right. It's even just more than just about data, it's about people and the things that they produce and have that have value. Data is a store of it, and it tells some stories. So I think that's the process, but how has it been for banks? How have you seen that change, that transformation?
So I mean, what's interesting about most regulation and most financial services regulation is it stops banks doing things. But this is kind of regulation that is making them do something. It's actually catalyzing something. So we call this a pro-competition measure, and it's fundamentally different. But it was interesting when I started doing the role about four years ago. A good friend said to me, you should think about this. I'll give you a framework. Think about this as comply, compete, innovate. And from a bank's point of view, it's going to be 95% comply and almost nothing on compete and almost nothing, even less on innovate.
Yeah.
And you know what? He was wrong. It was far, far worse. It was 99% comply and a tiny 1% compete and 0 on innovate. And I hate to say it, for a large portion of the program, it stayed like that. And in one regard, I'm quite happy about that, because the compliance department is the best funded department in the bank. And actually it meant that when they realized that they had to do this, they could mobilize. They're pretty good at mobilizing when they have to do it.
And they're efficient. A lot of the back office departments like Treasury and some other things are actually efficient.
Just get on with it. So it meant that we got there. But then once this is built, you really need to try, and you can't stay in that position. It has to turn into compete and innovate. And one of the things that I'm trying to do, but it's not in my regulatory powers, is to try and encourage them to do that. You would think that you wouldn't need to have to encourage them, but I've found that you do. Now, the reason for that is because I think for open banking to really work, it needs to be sustainable. For it to be sustainable, you have to have both parties, fintechs and banks, seeing a imperative, and I'll say a commercial imperative, to continuing to make it evolve. Fintechs is fine. That's kind of easy because you can understand they're getting access to the data, they're creating new products, they're finding new customers. The problem is the banks. Now, what people used to say is, well, the banks can act like fintechs and they can do all the same thing.
We've all heard those, and we've all seen them in jeans in a department with colored painted walls and what I would call innovation theater.
Yeah.
And they tried. But when the culture and the mindset and the incentive structure doesn't change, does it really change?
It's super hard. It's super hard. But also, you know, you take another look at it, and actually, that's not the right answer, because all that's doing is incentivizing them to consume other people's APIs, other banks' APIs. What we're trying to do is get them to produce their own APIs. That's the hard bit in all of this. And therefore, what we have landed on, and this is still a kind of proof of concept, but I can't see any reason why it won't work, is we're saying that the banks should be allowed to create premium APIs. So that the open banking APIs that we have at the moment, consider them regulatory APIs. So these are APIs that the banks have to expose. They've got no choice in it. They have to make it available to any authorized entity and for free and without contract. But what I'm trying to encourage them to do now is develop premium APIs that include additional items of data that aren't in the scope of the regulatory APIs, that they can now sell to third parties under contract. And the beauty of that is it uses 99% of exactly the same infrastructure, but now there's a commercial imperative for them to actually produce and promote these APIs. In other words, what we're doing, if you think about it, we're all very familiar with the kind of the freemium model in tech. This is kind of like the freemium model for open banking. So you've got the basic APIs that the fintechs can use, and when they need additional things, they should be able to ask the banks for it, and the banks should, using exactly the same rails, be able to provide it. And what I'm hoping, and I think you'll find this interesting particularly, is that this is actually part of, these are baby steps towards a form of digital identity. because the banks have a lot of information on us as individuals because we've all been KYC'd. And if we want to share that information, they're not in the open banking APIs, but they could be in the premium APIs. And then I can authorize a third party to be able to pull that information. And for a price per click, they can then get that information with all the provenance of receiving it from a bank. But there are a whole host of other premium APIs that the banks could use. It's just that the first one we've developed standards for are in that area. We call them extended customer attributes, and they allow the APIs to be able to share with the customer's consent to authorize third parties. They allow them to share things like date of birth, phone number, email, address, things like that.
So much to pick up on, and so many aspects of what you said. But I need to ask this question, and it's not a very difficult. Why compete before innovate, not innovate before compete? I think that one of the things that excites me the most around some of the data publications and topics I've seen you speak about is a world where open becomes more than just a world we needed instead of calling new banking, because it would get a bit weird. There's lots of banks that name in different countries. We call it open banking to build it back to the consumer and build it back to being open.
I'm very happy to answer that. And I'm not here to defend that individual's framework. There are many different frameworks, but I think the reason why there was a natural progression from comply to compete to innovate rather than comply to leapfrog to innovate, because that's kind of what you're saying, is that the comply bit is something a bank has to do. The compete is where they're competing with each other for existing revenue streams that you can model on an Excel spreadsheet, that you can build a business case for. The innovate stuff has got so much uncertainty that you don't even know how to monetize it. So if a bank looks at open banking, the first thing they think is, can I use open banking to get more current accounts? Can I use open banking to sell more loans? Can I use open banking to cross-sell savings products? That's what I consider compete. Can I use open banking to monetize customers' data with their consent in other sectors, such as home delivery, such as renting cars, all this? At some point the banker sits there and their head blows up and they go, of course it kind of makes sense, but what's the price per click? What's the model? What's the regulatory structure? That's what I consider the innovate bit, and it does take them
the competing and the getting better. I like that. I can see it. I think there's a complacency that comes from, I remember the first time I came in contact with open banking was before PSD2, so it was around 2013, I think. And we were talking about it. I was talking in Brazil being like, my country, this is definitely going to happen. There's only like 5 banks. And have you seen the credit spreads in that place? It's crazy, right? You have a tangible P&L in a lot of niche mass markets in a country with 210 million people. So has our reality been different, Ingrid? Have our banks dragged their feet? Or how is the market? It's currently and obviously hot when it comes to fintechs taking up space and looking at things like Imran just talked about. In a world where you're digitally connected, what is the role of the bank? How has it been in Brazil when somebody out there just heard all that insight from Imran?
Okay, I believe our market in Brazil is a little bit different regarding the behavior of the consumer in Brazil. We have a lot of people here that is unbanked. It's like without any relationship with banks. And then we need to help these people to understand the financial market. They don't like banks. This is the phrase. They don't like banks.
Has anybody ever done a survey in your time, Imran? Does anybody really like banks? Like, was there an affection towards banking? Like, part of my history ignorance, but like, if I start about Medici, like, is it really like good?
Yeah, but here, I believe they hate bank is the word. And then I believe this relationship can be good. It's not. I, for example, I don't like to do a payment. I don't wake up every day, oh, I wanted to pay a bill. No, but this relationship can be better. This relationship can be more easy, maybe. And then my point of view related to open banking is the open banking can help us, first of all, to rebuilding this relationship, change the feeling of banks, of the financial market, because it's not related only to banks. Now we have fintechs, we have a lot of types of servers. So first of all, to rebuilding this relationship. After that, to providing financial education, we need to do that. And open banking for me is my personal opinion. It's a very good tool to do that, and to do this financial education with simple words, simple communication, simple voice. So is the second point that I believe it's different than UK, because I believe the market in UK, it's my point of view for sure, it's more mature than the Brazil, because we have this challenge nowadays. After the financial education, we believe the open banking can bring to us the data education. Nowadays, we don't read, for example, the terms of use, the privacy agreement. So we just click and use the application without take care about this very important piece of the relationship. So data education is to not only to read but understand the terms and conditionals, and to understand the relationship. Oh, I will provide my data, and what type of things the server, the bank, the fintech can do with my data. It's for my benefit or not. Who is gain with this sharing? So the data education is the point that I believe the open banking can bring into us, and I believe also that UK is more mature about this education. And for sure, after that, related to the financial market, to offer more credit for our population, the best credit that we can have with more types of guarantee, more cheaper than we have nowadays, to provide more types of regular bank accounts, the bank accounts that can talk with you, your situation, your specific issue of the market. And then when we open the open banking with another type of business, we can have benefits in retail, especially in Brazil. We love the retail piece to building the more strategical products for the people. The part of the medicine, I believe we can have very again with the open data at all, but this behavior on financial market, I believe we can bring insights for all industries in Brazil. And it's the beginning of this construction, and then I can say a lot of other things, but we have some time here.
Some
that
more
we need
time
to stop it.
and
Yeah.
an opportunity in person. Imran, I wanted to ask one question. If you can rapid fire this. Do people out there outside of this fintech bubble, do they need to know what open banking is?
Not today. It's kind of like, I often think about open banking actually a lot like the internet.
Yeah,
you know, people don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to use the internet. They wake up in the morning and say, I want to use Netflix, I want to buy something, I want to check my email, or whatever it is. They go for the propositions, not the infrastructure. But, you know, that shouldn't come as any surprise to anyone. So you know, the open banking is working best when no one really sees it. I think the big development that we need to get, and then people may start thinking about a bit more, is when open banking moves to open finance, and when open finance moves to open data, and then people may understand it a bit more. But I think, you know, why would they need to? Most people don't know how electricity works, but you know, everyone uses a television and a phone. So
yeah, I hope for that day where but we need everybody to get in that movement from open banking to open finance to open data. It's a truly collaborative space, and it's been a pleasure hearing you speak. So thank you so much for being part of Open Banking Week and sharing a little bit about your insight. I think the community out there is going to want to hear more. So hopefully you do come back, and hopefully perhaps positive, but in person one day.
hopefully.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for having me. Really nice to see you guys.
Take care.
Thank you.
Ingrid, I'm going to get you to answer that question. Ermin, you can leave if you have to.
Thank you. Bye, Ingrid.
Bye. Nice to meet you.
Do you think people out there, you talked about education, and you know, I'm super passionate about this. I co-founded a company that's all we do is tell stories and education around this movement to people's awareness of their finances. Like, I often say this to my bank clients, like, you guys messed this up. Like, people don't know what money is. Like, they don't really understand how it works. That's why people are in debt. And that's why there's such a balance and empower. Can we use data as a vehicle for change? Like, can we bring people an opportunity? And our country is insanely tech savvy. They produce data more than they produce a lot of other things. How do you think people need to get there? Like, where do you see this education? Like, iDream is in the schools since like we could be a fintech nation, like a tech fintech nation. Like China did it. Come on.
Yeah, but we have a lot of people that grow it up, so it's not possible to help them like we can help children. And then I believe banks can help us to have a more financial education, especially for open banking. So we are seeing nowadays, it's the beginning of this piece in the commercial, no, I don't know in English. Oh my God. Advertising. Yeah. In the middle of the day, very expensive hour of the advertising, a big bank in Brazil showing up just a few words related to open banking with a very famous person that came from the BBB, the Brazil Big Brother. And then I believe it's a very good strategy because it's a popular personality. It's a popular person, famous person, and talking about a difficult term because it is in English in Brazil. It's not easy to understand when you don't have the financial education at the beginning of your life. We don't know what is data. You don't know to handle your own financial situation. So I believe this can help a lot to establish the meaning of open banking in Brazil. And not only the big banks, I believe we as fintech can help these establish this education at all. And then talking again and showing. Sometimes I heard that someone, it is fintech around my word. Oh, fintech, and I normally say that we need to talk about more the fintech innovation in financial market, because it's the way that we can bring more financial education without just a book, a formal education, and then bring these words in a popular space with popular people and in television and advertising. So for me, we are trying to do that, and I believe it's a good way to do.
I couldn't agree more. Like I often say this to my co-founder Beatrice, who you obviously know and adores you as well, that we need Netflix. Like we need something that is accessible to tell the story of what this stuff is. Like even seeing a person from a popular soap opera or TV show explaining a difficult term, I still think we're missing a big portion of, were they financially literate to begin with? Like, how are we breaking this stuff down? Like, how are we preparing our nation and the next generations to understand this stuff so they can navigate this like balance and parity that exists in society? I think that's what gets me excited about this, like technology as a fuel or data as a fuel. Like you had industrial revolutions that were fueled by coal. You have an industrial revolution that's fueled by data. That's what's going to be open. And that's why there's a few things we have to get right. And I totally agree with you. Like a lot of work to be done still on people realizing what their worth or the digital worth looks like. And that becoming a means of
parallel work, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's a parallel work. It's not only to do advertising with popular people, but it's always in the education for children. It's in the university. It's everywhere. We need that, and we don't have financial education in the regular education that we have in Brazil.
I know I just don't understand how that's a thing, or cybersecurity to a certain extent, even though I do believe that we're going to build safety parameters, but like teaching, it's almost like teaching kids boundaries, you know, like where you're supposed to know. Like I often say this to people, like if you're giving everything and it's free, like there's some sort of iffy, like a good world has like balance and give and take, right? So it's like, how do we educate Brazil? Like I get excited about the opportunity, and I get excited that there's people like you helping do this. Like I'm super excited to be in the next phases of what's to come around data and identity, as I want to get more involved. And hopefully Open Banking Week can be a place where everybody can get involved. Thank you so much, Ingrid, for sharing a little bit about your story.